Thank you, Chairperson. I'm just going to give you a brief points. We have already seen the case with the live inbox case which I presented on central vein stenosis and how to open it. So I'm just, in the coming 10 minutes, I'm just going to give you just a few points. What are the concepts of treating central vein stenosis? Venous recanalization is like a rock climbing. Being careless means disastrous. So if you go wrong, then you're wrong, and then nothing can be done, or you can get into real problems. But if you are careful, it means that you have to circumspect, you have to be prepared, you have roadmaps, you have the right equipment, you plan the patient well, and you and the patient always have a sort of an option to backtrack, reconsider other pathways, and then come back and do the procedure in a different way. Now, what are the goals of doing opening the central vein occlusions or stenosis? Basically, there are two goals. One is to have an excess, and the other one is to have a symptomatic relief, especially if patients have a superior vena cava syndrome. And sometimes we also need to have an excess in patients who have this sort of a symptomatic problem. Now, once we do this, there are two ways to do. Either we have a one-way access, we have an ultrasound, we just puncture the outflow of the venous AV fistula and then go ahead and treat. But the other one is to have a through-and-through access, where we have an access from the femoral artery and we have an access from plus minus from the other side as well. Now, how do we use? Normally we start with micropuncture needles, we go with hydrophilic wires, and then if we cannot cross with that, then we go with the hard end of hydrophilic wires. And then again, if we can't recanalize, then we use sharp recanalization techniques or special dedicated guide wires. And it's very important to have a CT before the procedure. It drastically reduces the time of the procedure, the radiation dose, and also the dose of the contrast given to the patient. And it's very important to know the confluent pathways. Once we are sure of our location, we don't have to give the contrast again and again. We do a fluoroscopic roadmap, and then on the roadmap we work, and we don't have to give repeated contrast. We can actually complete the whole procedure and not giving the contrast again up till the final result. And normally we go from the radial artery or we go from the femoral artery, and then we take the venous phase from the fistula, the outflow. What it does, it gives you both the inflow, the anastomosis, and the outflow delineation, and we can treat these lesions in continuity. And many times the problem is not only at one point, it is at the anastomosis and also at multiple levels up till the right atrium. Now, once we are doing a procedure, we should always do it under fluoroscopic guidance, because we can then navigate the wires, we can secure the progress of the procedure. Unlike an ultrasound angioplasty, where we do not know what we are doing, we just have a location and we go ahead and dilate, but we cannot guide our procedures all the way while we are doing it. If you are unsecure of your pathways, you are unsecure which veins you are going through, whether you are subintimal or not, it is better that we use first the coronary wires. We have a minimal dilatation, and then once we have a dilatation, we should follow whether we are in the true path or not the true path, and then get into the true path and dilate with bigger balloons. If contrast is a problem, or there is a problem of left ventricular failure, we can use carbon dioxide or we can use gadolinium, rarely, and sometimes we can use an intravascular ultrasound, especially if we have one. Now, these are the types of patients which we treat. This is a complete occlusion of the innominate vein and the superior vena cava, and also the left innominate vein. It is not unusual to have these sort of patients, and they present with superior vena cava syndrome. Usually it is a malignant condition, but in 40% of the patients, it is because of a central, long-standing use of a central venous catheter. And these are the various signs and symptoms. We are not going to go through this. But the point to remember here is most important is to have a CT or an MRI evaluation of this venous system, and also to do a very good angiography to delineate the veins, the problems in the multiple veins, the confluence, and the superior vena cava. And this is very easily done by doing an arterial injection either through the radial artery or through the femoral artery, via femoral artery to the brachial artery, and delineating the entire fistula, the inflow and the outflow. And many a times, what we do is we take stiff wires and we do a railroading, and we take, it's like a mother and daughter technique, we take in a hydrophilic guide wire inside a hydrophilic catheter and then try to open inch by inch. And that's how we get a lot of sort of a probing pressure, and we can recanalize many of these veins. And if we tend to sort of abrade the vein or perforate the veins, we can come out, but if we dilate, then it's better that we put in a covered stent. Now, this is not uncommon to have stenosis of both the innominate veins at the confluence of superior vena cava. And this is one of our patients where we do a kissing balloon followed by a kissing stent, and these are the results which we get. If you see the outcomes of interventions in superior vena cava syndrome, the results are very, very satisfying and gratifying. The acute results are very good. But in hemodialysis patients, there is a high risk of restenosis because of the turbulent flow, and it is better that we go for repeated dilatations than stenting. If you put in a stent, actually the acute result may be a little better or cosmetically better, but long-term results are definitely inferior, and we end up losing a lot of collateral veins, and it will be very, very impossible to then re-intervene. Now, regarding the outcomes of superior vena cava or central vein occlusion, the most dreaded complications are mediastinal hematoma, stent migration if we put one, because it's not uncommon for the stent to slowly milk into the RA and then go into the right ventricle and cause a ventricular fibrillation. And we have seen stents in the pulmonary artery and actually taken them out. And stent thrombosis is again a very dreaded phenomenon, because in central venous occlusion we always have a residual thrombus or an associated thrombus which needs to be tackled. And we should be very careful of superior vena cava perforation and cardiac tamponade, and also infection in these patients. So in conclusion, these are the guiding principles of doing central vein obstruction intervention. And this is what I had shown you in the previous 20-minute video. And there were many questions and answers about why we should stand and where we should stand and where we should not stand and what pressures we should go and how we should guide our procedure with the pressure gradients. Now, this is one of our patients which we have started using now is the radial technique. What you see here on the left upper panel is that is a total occlusion of the outflow of the AV fistula at the level of anastomosis. It's very simple. We go from the radial route, we pass in a guide wire through the anastomosis into the outflow and dilate with the coronary balloon and then with the peripheral balloon. And in the second slide, if you see on the right upper panel, that the venous outflow is open. And then we go ahead and treat the outflow. If you see the outflow tract, which has multiple stenosis by a balloon, and then this patient also had a central venous stenosis which we opened. So this is easy, and it's very important that if we can do it through a radial artery approach, we can just put a radial band distally. We don't have to go through the venous outflow. We don't have to compress a treated AV fistula, and the long-term results and the risk of thrombosis is very low. In cases where we cannot actually get through the lesion, we use a power wire. Now, this is a wire which uses the cutting power of the radio frequency machine, and this actually drills a hole into the occluded segment of the vein. And how this is done, we have a snare on the opposite side, and we have a power wire which is very steerable. And we then, once we get into the right plane, we start giving the radio frequency ablation, and it starts cutting the occlusion, and we try to aim to get into the snare, and most of the time it works. And after that, the procedure, once the wire is through, the procedure is simple. We do a balloon angioplasty followed by plus-minus stenting. And these are a lot of patients which we have treated. In my personal experience, we have done 97 patients, and most of these patients had superior subclavian vein stenosis or a brachiocephalic vein stenosis and superior vena cava syndrome. And many of these had a combination of this. The technical success is quite high, and I mean, we could achieve success and patency in 91 patients out of the 97 patients we have done. We have done, mostly we have done angioplasty, and very few patients we have done an angioplasty. And the patency rates at 6 months, the primary patency was 48%, and the secondary patency was 87%. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khanna, for your presentation. And I think we just have time for one question, if that could be asked.
I wanted to ask a question that because of this indwelling catheters, which is the commonest site of stenosis of central vein which we have found in these cases?
The most common site is the brachiocephalic vein. The subclavian vein where it joins becomes a brachiocephalic vein. That's the commonest site, followed by the subclavian vein and then followed by a superior vena cava. That's the most common site.
It means that during placement of those catheters, the points where trauma could have occurred might be the...
That could be one of the reasons, because that's where the most turbulence occurs. You know, that's the place where the blood actually has a turbulent flow when it turns into the superior vena cava. It could be one of the reasons, or it could also be because of angulation and a long-dwelling catheter. The contact with the intima is more, and there's more reaction, neo-intimal reaction at that point.
Whether there is any role of intimal hyperplasia in this, causing this stenosis?
Yes, these are very, very fibrotic occlusions. I mean, stenosis and occlusion, and it's not easy to dilate these. And even if you dilate, there is a high degree of recoil. So angiographic results may not be very good, but the hemodynamic results could be good, and that's what we want to achieve.
Thank you.
Since being the end user to the technique of permanent catheters, perm cats, particularly in the dialysis patients as a nephrologist, this is, as you rightly said, it's a very, very challenging and a very regular problem with us. More or less, majority of the patients with more than 12 months of catheter in place, invariably we start getting some kind of SVC syndrome picture, and in about 18 months to 2 years, practically I would say about 70% of patients required at least some kind of procedure intervention. That's what we've been observing in most of my patients in last 3 to 4 years, ever since we have started placing the permacath. And in fact, Dr. Khanna's technique and Dr. Khanna's help has been a real tremendous support to salvage most of my patients in my clinical practice.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khanna.